Get out, Nathan! You don't belong here anymore!
I didn't know, not at first.
You knew enough.
I made a mistake.
You made a choice.
Victoria Hayes didn't raise her voice when she told Nathan to get out of the car. She didn't need to. The way she looked at him, calm, distant, final, made it clear he no longer belonged in her world. Her mother dropped his bag onto the gravel without hesitation, and Logan Mercer slid into Nathan's seat like it had always been his. As the gates of Blackwood Manor came into view, Victoria smiled, convinced she was finally stepping into the life she deserved. What she didn't know was this. The man she had just thrown out wasn't just her husband. He was the only son of the empire behind those gates. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Weeks earlier, their marriage hadn't yet broken in public, but the cracks had already spread too far to hide. Nathan Ashford Bennett spent most of his days inside buildings that other people had abandoned. Old courthouses, libraries with cracked stone columns, churches where the wood beams had started to rot. He worked quietly, restoring what still had value even when nobody else could see it. He didn't talk much about his work. He didn't need to. It was the kind of job that either made sense to you or it didn't. Victoria used to understand it. In the early years of their marriage, she had admired the patience it took. She had once told a friend that Nathan had a way of seeing potential where everyone else saw failure. Back then, she said it with pride. Now, she avoided the question entirely. What does your husband do? Had become something she answered with a tight smile and a quick change of subject. Nathan noticed. He always noticed. He just didn't say anything. They lived in a rented house on the edge of Lexington. It wasn't small, but it wasn't impressive either. Nathan drove an older pickup truck that ran perfectly well, but looked like it belonged to a different decade. He never replaced it. Victoria had stopped riding in it months ago. The shift hadn't happened all at once. It came slowly, or quietly, a comment here, a comparison there. Her friends started buying second homes. Her coworkers talked about promotions, investments, partnerships. Victoria listened, she measured, and somewhere along the way she started deciding that the life she had wasn't enough. Her mother, Judith Hayes, didn't help. Judith had a way of appearing at exactly the right moment to remind Victoria what other women had, what other husbands provided, what kind of life she should expect. Nathan had learned to recognize those moments. A phone call that lasted just long enough, a dinner that ended with Victoria quieter than usual, a look she didn't try to hide anymore. Judith never insulted him directly. She didn't need to. Her silence did the work for her. Nathan didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He kept working. He kept showing up. That had always been his answer. But showing up stopped being enough. There were nights when Victoria would sit across from him at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, her expression somewhere between distracted and disappointed. He could feel the distance between them, even when they were sitting 3 feet apart. And still he said nothing. Because part of him was still waiting. Waiting for the version of her who had once chosen him without hesitation. What Victoria never knew, what almost no one knew, was that Nathan's last name wasn't the full story. He had built his life carefully, deliberately. Simple house. Simple job, quiet routine. Not because that was all he could have, but because it was what he had chosen. There were calls he didn't take when she was in the room, emails he read and closed without comment, occasions when someone addressed him with a level of respect that didn't quite match what she believed he was. She never asked, not really, and he never volunteered the truth. Because the few times he had considered it, something had always stopped him. A joke she laughed at, a comment she made about someone wasting their potential. The way she spoke about success, as if it were something you could only measure in numbers, small things. Individually, they meant nothing. Together, they meant everything. So he waited, and while he waited, someone else stepped in. Logan Mercer entered their lives the way men like him always did, smooth, confident, perfectly timed. He met Victoria through a networking event. A casual introduction that didn't feel accidental once Nathan thought about it later. Logan listened to her, paid attention in ways Nathan no longer did, or maybe never had in the way she now wanted. He took her to places where the menu didn't list prices, sent gifts that weren't flashy but precise, chosen. Victoria started smiling at her phone again, not the way she used to smile at Nathan, a different kind of smile. One that didn't include him. Nathan noticed that too. Still, he said nothing, because saying something would mean admitting what was happening, and once you admitted it, you couldn't pretend it wasn't real. The first time Logan came up in conversation, Victoria described him as ambitious. That word stayed with Nathan. Ambitious. As if that was the thing she had been missing, as if everything else had never mattered. There was a moment, small, quiet, easy to miss, when Nathan realized something had shifted permanently. Victoria didn't look at him the same way anymore, not with frustration, not even with disappointment, with evaluation. As if she was measuring what he was worth and deciding the answer wasn't enough. That was when he understood. Not all at once, but clearly. This wasn't a phase, this was a direction, and she had already started moving. Nathan didn't stop her. He didn't confront her. He didn't reveal anything, because the truth, once spoken, couldn't be taken back, and some truths only mattered if they were discovered the hard way. That night, as he stood alone in the garage, his phone vibrated in his hand. He glanced at the screen. Margaret Lawson. He let it ring once, twice, then he answered. Her voice was calm, precise, the way it always was. "Mr. Bennett," she said, "we need to talk. It's about your father." Nathan didn't move, didn't speak, but something inside him shifted, and for the first time in a long time, the life he had built so carefully began to feel like it was about to collide with something much larger than he had planned. He looked toward the house, toward the light still on in the kitchen, toward the woman who no longer saw him clearly. Then he turned back to the phone. "Tell me," he said quietly. Nathan didn't move when Margaret Lawson spoke. He stood in the garage, one hand still resting on the edge of the workbench, the faint smell of dust and varnish lingering in the air. For a moment, everything around him felt distant. The house, the quiet hum of the refrigerator inside, the faint sound of Victoria's voice drifting from the kitchen. "A memorial?" she was saying, her tone sharp, almost irritated. "At a private estate. Do you even know who these people are?" Nathan listened without turning. Margaret continued on the phone, her voice steady, professional. "Your father passed early this morning. The arrangements have already been set in motion. The memorial will be held at Blackwood Manor. You are expected to attend." Nathan closed his eyes briefly. He had known this call would come one day. He just hadn't expected it to feel this quiet. "I understand," he said. There was a pause on the other end, softer this time. "He left specific instructions, Nathan. There are matters that need your attention. Not all of them can wait." Nathan glanced toward the door leading into the house. Victoria's voice rose slightly. "No, Mom, you don't understand. He barely knows these people. It's probably some distant connection. I'll figure it out." Judith Hayes responded through the speaker, her voice faint but unmistakable. Confident. Certain. "Well, if it's an estate like that, you don't miss an opportunity. You go. You present yourself properly. People remember faces in those rooms." Nathan exhaled slowly. "Send me the details," he said into the phone. "I'll be there." Margaret didn't respond immediately. When she did, her tone carried something beneath the professionalism. "We'll talk when you arrive." The call ended. Nathan lowered the phone but didn't move. Inside the house, Victoria stepped into the hallway, already dressed for something that had nothing to do with grief. Her expression sharpened the moment she saw him. "So?" she asked. "What was that about?" Nathan walked past her, calm, controlled. "Someone important passed. There's a memorial." She folded her arms. "Important to you or important in general?" He didn't answer right away. "That depends," he said. Victoria let out a short breath, already impatient. "Where is it?" "Blackwood Manor." The name landed, not because Nathan gave it weight, but because she recognized it. Victoria's posture shifted almost instantly. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in confusion, but in calculation. "Blackwood Manor," she repeated, "as in the Blackwood estate? The one outside Ashcroft?" Nathan nodded once. Her reaction was immediate. "That's not just some random memorial," she said, her voice quickening. "That place doesn't host anything unless it matters. Do you even know who owns it?" Nathan looked at her. "I have an idea." Victoria didn't catch the meaning. Of course she didn't. Instead, she turned away, already pulling out her phone. "I need to call my mother." She stepped into the living room, her tone shifting as soon as Judith picked up. "Mom, it's Blackwood Manor." A pause. Then Judith's voice came through clearer now. louder, sharper. Are you serious? Yes. Well, then you're not showing up in whatever you're wearing now, Judith said immediately. And Nathan, does he even have something appropriate? Victoria glanced at him, her eyes scanning him quickly, dismissively. I'll handle that, she said. Nathan stood there, listening. Not reacting, not correcting, because he had heard all of this before, different words, same meaning, judgment disguised as practicality. Later that night, Victoria moved through the bedroom with purpose. Dresses laid out, shoes compared, jewelry selected with careful attention. Nathan watched from the doorway for a moment. You don't have to come, he said quietly. She looked up, almost offended. Excuse me? I mean it, he continued. It's not that kind of event. Victoria let out a short laugh, shaking her head. You don't get to decide that. It's not about deciding it, she cut in. Because you clearly don't understand how these things work. People notice who shows up, who belongs, who doesn't. The last part lingered. Nathan held her gaze. And you think I don't belong, he said. She didn't answer directly, she didn't need to. Silence did it for her. Victoria turned back to the mirror, adjusting an earring. Just don't embarrass me, okay? Nathan nodded once. Okay. He left the room before she could see the shift in his expression. Not anger, not even disappointment, something quieter. The next morning, the SUV arrived right on time. Victoria had arranged it herself. Of course she had. It wasn't about comfort. It was about presentation. Judith was already waiting inside when Nathan stepped out of the house. She didn't greet him, just gave him a brief look, one that measured and dismissed in the same breath. Sit in the front, she said, as if assigning a position rather than offering one. Nathan did as told. Logan Mercer appeared minutes later, stepping out of his own car with effortless confidence. Suit perfectly fitted, her expression relaxed like he already knew how the day would unfold. He greeted Victoria first, then Judith. Nathan was last. Logan extended his hand, polite but distant. Good to see you. Nathan shook it once. Is it? He replied. Logan smiled slightly, not answering. The drive was quiet at first. Then Victoria and Logan started talking. Low voices, shared jokes. References Nathan wasn't meant to follow. Judith added occasional comments, mostly about the estate they were heading toward. Property value, location, influence. Nathan watched the road. Listened without reacting, because reacting would change nothing, because the truth didn't need defending yet. About halfway through the drive, his phone buzzed again. He glanced down. Margaret Lawson. He didn't answer. Not this time. Instead, he silenced it and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Victoria noticed. Who keeps calling you? She asked, her tone casual but edged with suspicion. Work, Nathan said. She didn't believe him, but she didn't push. Because she had already decided what he was worth, and whatever it wasn't worth digging deeper. As the SUV turned off the main road and onto the long private drive, the landscape changed. Trees lined both sides, perfectly maintained. The kind of place where nothing was left to chance. Victoria leaned forward slightly, her eyes scanning everything. This place, she whispered. It's incredible. Logan nodded, as if he belonged there. Judith said nothing, but Nathan could see the satisfaction in her expression. This was the world she had always believed her daughter deserved. The gates appeared ahead. Tall, iron, controlled. Victoria's breathing slowed. This was it, the moment she had been preparing for. She straightened her posture, adjusted her coat, glanced once at Logan. Then she turned toward Nathan, calm, decisive. Switch seats with Logan, she said. Nathan looked at her. Didn't move. I'm serious, she added, opening her door slightly. We're not walking in like this. The words hung in the air. Nathan's hand tightened slightly on his knee. Not in anger, in restraint. Because he understood something in that moment with complete clarity. This wasn't about a seat. It wasn't about the car. It was about who she believed belonged beside her, and who didn't. Nathan reached for the door handle, then stopped, because his phone buzzed again. This time he looked. A message. From Margaret Lawson. He opened it. Just one line. We're expecting you, Mr. Bennett. The board has already arrived. Nathan's gaze lingered on the screen for a second longer than necessary. Then he looked up, at Victoria, at Logan, at the gates waiting ahead, and slowly he let go of the door handle. Not yet, he said quietly. Nathan's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The way he said it, quiet, controlled, final, hung in the air longer than any argument could have. Not yet. Victoria stared at him like she hadn't heard him correctly. Like the words didn't belong to the man she thought she knew. What do you mean, not yet? She asked, her tone sharpening. Logan shifted slightly in the seat behind her, watching, not interrupting, just observing the shift in control he hadn't expected. Nathan didn't turn toward them right away. He kept his eyes on the gates ahead, on the security booth just beyond them, on the small tablet in the guard's hands. Nathan said, "We're not rearranging anything until we get there." Victoria let out a short, incredulous laugh. "That's not how this works. It is today." That was new. She felt it immediately. Not loud, not aggressive, just unmovable. Judith leaned forward from the back seat, her voice tight with disapproval. "Nathan, this is not the moment to make a point. We're about to enter a private estate. You don't walk in like..." "Like what?" Nathan asked, finally turning his head. Judith stopped, not because she didn't have an answer, but because for the first time Nathan was looking directly at her, not politely, not passively. Clearly, she pulled back slightly, masking it with a dismissive scoff. "You know exactly what I mean." Nathan nodded once, then looked away again. The SUV rolled forward slowly. The gates of Blackwood Manor stood tall ahead of them, iron and deliberate. Nothing about the place felt accidental. Every detail signaled control, ownership. Victoria's attention shifted back to the view, her irritation momentarily replaced by anticipation. "This is it," she said quietly, almost to herself. Logan smiled faintly. "Impressive, isn't it?" She nodded, already leaning into the version of herself she believed belonged here. Nathan said nothing, because he knew something she didn't. The guard stepped forward as the SUV stopped at the checkpoint. He greeted them with professional neutrality. "Names, please." Victoria rolled down the window, her posture shifting again. Controlled, composed, practiced. "Victoria Hayes," she said. "We're here for the memorial service." The guard nodded and turned to his tablet. He typed, paused, scrolled, typed again. Victoria waited, her expression fixed but tightening at the edges. Logan leaned slightly forward, adding, "Logan Mercer, we're expected." The guard glanced up briefly, then back down. "No listing under those names," he said. The words landed harder than they should have. Victoria blinked. "That's not possible. This is a private invitation." "I understand," the guard replied, still calm. "But I don't have you on the access list." Judith leaned forward again, her tone sharper now. "Check again." The guard did. Same result. Victoria's composure cracked just slightly. "There must be a mistake. We were invited." "By whom?" the guard asked. She hesitated. Not because she didn't know, but because she hadn't thought she'd need to justify it. "It's a personal connection," she said, deflecting. The guard nodded slowly. "I'll need a confirmed name on the list." Silence filled the car. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Victoria turned her head slowly, deliberately, toward Nathan, the same man she had just tried to move out of sight, the same man she had decided didn't belong. "Well," she said, "say something." Nathan met her gaze, held it. Didn't rush. Didn't react to the tension in her voice. He just looked at her the way he had been looking at her for months now, like he was seeing something she refused to see herself. Then, without breaking eye contact, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, unlocked it, not to call, not to argue, just to check something. Victoria's frustration spiked. "Nathan, this is not the time it is," he said quietly. Logan watched him now more closely. Something about the way Nathan moved didn't match the role he had been playing. Too calm, too certain. Nathan's screen lit up again. Another message. Margaret Lawson. He opened it. A longer one this time. "Security has your identification on file. You won't need to announce yourself. Proceed when ready." Nathan read it once, then locked the phone. He looked at the guard, then back at Victoria. "You should go ahead," he said. The words confused her. "What, you and Logan?" Nathan continued. "You wanted to enter together." There was no sarcasm in his voice, no anger, just clarity. Victoria frowned. "We can't get in." Nathan tilted his head slightly. "You're sure about that?" The question landed differently. Not dismissive, not challenging, just accurate. Logan spoke for the first time since the exchange began. "Let's not overcomplicate this," he said smoothly. "We can call someone inside." Nathan nodded once. "You can try," Victoria's patience snapped. "This is ridiculous." "We don't have time for this." Nathan, either help or stay out of the way. There it was. The line she had already drawn in her mind. Help or disappear. Nathan looked at her one last time, at the certainty in her eyes. At the way she had already decided what role he played. Then he reached for the door handle. This time, he didn't stop. He opened the door and stepped out onto the gravel. The sound echoed sharper than it should have. The air felt different outside, quieter, heavier. He picked up his bag from the back. No one moved to help him. No one said anything. Victoria didn't stop him, didn't reconsider, didn't hesitate, because in her mind, this was already over. Nathan closed the door gently, stepped back. The SUV idled in front of him. Logan shifted forward into the seat Nathan had just left, smooth and effortless, as if filling a space that had already been vacated. Victoria didn't look at Nathan again. She faced forward. "Drive," she said. The SUV rolled ahead, toward the gate, toward the life she believed she was stepping into. Nathan stood there, his bag at his feet, watching them move away. The guard hesitated, glancing between the vehicle and Nathan. Then his radio crackled. A voice on the other end, sharp, immediate. The guard straightened instantly. "Copy that," he said. He stepped back from the booth, and for the first time since they arrived, he looked directly at Nathan, not casually, not dismissively, with recognition. Nathan didn't move, didn't speak. He just stood there, waiting. The SUV reached the gate. Victoria adjusted her posture again, ready. Certain. Then the system chimed, a soft electronic tone. The screen mounted beside the gate flickered, displayed 4 words. Victoria saw it in the reflection of her side mirror before she fully turned her head. And in that brief second, everything she believed about the man she had just left behind began to fracture. Because the gates didn't open for her. They opened away from her, and behind her, footsteps approached Nathan, measured, deliberate. A voice followed, low, respectful. "Mr. Bennett, welcome home." Nathan picked up his bag and stepped forward, while the gates stayed closed in front of Victoria. Nathan didn't look back as he stepped forward. The gravel shifted under his shoes with a soft, controlled crunch. Every step felt steady, measured, like he had already accepted something long before this moment happened. Behind him, the SUV stopped abruptly. Victoria's hand tightened the steering wheel as she stared at the gate. It hadn't opened for her. It had opened away from her. "For him? What is this?" she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Logan leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing at the screen beside the gate. There has to be a mistake. But there wasn't. The guard didn't rush to correct anything. He didn't check again. He didn't apologize. Instead, he stepped aside, completely, clearing the path, not for the vehicle, for Nathan. Victoria turned in her seat, finally looking at him again. Really looking this time. He wasn't rushing, he wasn't confused, he wasn't trying to explain anything. He was walking like he knew exactly where he belonged. And for the first time, something inside her shifted. Not understanding, not yet, but doubt. "Wait," she said, opening the car door halfway. "Nathan, what is going on?" He stopped. Just for a second, not turning fully around, not walking back, just enough to acknowledge that she had spoken. "You should go inside," he said calmly. "You didn't want to miss this." The words landed wrong. Too calm, too detached. Victoria stepped out of the SUV now, ignoring Judith calling her name from behind. "This isn't funny," she said, her voice sharper. "If this is some kind of misunderstanding, you need to fix it." Nathan turned then, fully. And for the first time since the drive began, his expression wasn't neutral. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. "There's nothing to fix," he said. Logan stepped out as well, adjusting his jacket, trying to reassert control over something that was slipping. "Let's not make this bigger than it is," Logan said smoothly. "Security systems glitch all the time. We can speak to someone inside." "You won't need to," the guard interrupted. Logan paused. The interruption alone was enough to irritate him. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked. The guard didn't answer Logan. He looked at Nathan, only Nathan. "Mr. Bennett," he said, respectful but firm, "they've been informed you've arrived." The name hung in the air. Victoria heard it, but it didn't fully register. Not yet. Bennett, it sounded familiar, but not in a way she could place. Nathan gave a small nod. "Thank you." The guard stepped back again, further this time, almost like he was making space for something larger than a person. Victoria's chest tightened. "Why did he call you that?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Nathan didn't answer, because there was nothing he could say that would make her understand without changing everything, and he wasn't ready to do that. Not here, not like this. "Get back in the car," Judith snapped from behind them, trying to regain control. "We're not standing out here like this. Nathan, if you know someone inside, then say it properly instead of playing games." Nathan looked at her briefly, then back at Victoria, still waiting, still trying to force this into something small, something manageable. "You should go in," he repeated. Victoria shook her head, frustration rising again. Not until you explain what's happening. Nathan studied her for a moment. There was a time when he would have explained everything, carefully, gently, trying to protect how she saw him, trying to protect what they had. That time was gone. You didn't want me walking through those gates, he said quietly. Remember? The words hit harder than anything else, because they were true, because she had said it, because she couldn't take them back. Logan stepped closer to her, lowering his voice. Victoria, this is turning into a scene. Let's just go inside, speak to someone and sort it out. He reached for her arm lightly, guiding, positioning, exactly the way he had been doing for weeks. Victoria hesitated, only for a second. Then she nodded. Fine, she said, pulling her arm back slightly. We'll handle it inside. She turned back toward the SUV, didn't look at Nathan again, because looking meant admitting something was wrong, and she wasn't ready for that. The car moved forward. This time, the gate didn't open immediately. The system paused, processing. Then slowly it opened, but not the same way, not welcoming. Just enough, just barely, like access had been granted. But not approval. Nathan watched them pass through. Watched the way Victoria sat straighter in her seat again. Reclaiming the version of herself she believed belonged here. Logan relaxed back slightly, as if the moment had resolved in his favor. Judith looked forward, already calculating how to turn this into something useful. None of them understood what had just happened. Nathan picked up his bag again. Samuel Brooks stepped forward from inside the gates. Dressed in a dark suit, posture straight, presence unmistakable. He had aged slightly since the last time Nathan saw him. But not in the ways that mattered. Mr. Bennett, Samuel said, his voice steady, respectful. We've been expecting you. Nathan nodded once. Is Margaret inside? He asked. She is, along with the board members and legal team. Nathan's grip tightened slightly on the handle of his bag. Board members, legal team. This wasn't just a memorial. It was already moving. Good, he said. Samuel hesitated for a moment before adding, there have been developments since this morning. Nathan didn't react outwardly. But he understood. Of course there had been. There always were. Anything urgent? He asked. Samuel gave a measured answer. Important enough that Ms. Lawson requested you come directly to the study before joining the others. Nathan exhaled quietly. The study. That meant documents, decisions, control. He nodded. Understood. They began walking together through the gate. Behind them, the iron doors closed again, this time with a heavier sound. Final. Nathan didn't look back, because there was nothing behind him that still belonged to him. As they moved along the path toward Blackwood Manor, the scale of the estate unfolded. Not flashy, not loud, just established, the kind of place that didn't need to prove anything. Nathan had been here before, but today felt different. Today he wasn't visiting. Samuel glanced at him once. Would you like me to inform them you've arrived? Nathan shook his head. Not yet. Samuel accepted that immediately, because some things didn't need explanation. They reached the entrance. Staff moved quietly in the background, already aware, already prepared. Nathan stepped inside. The air shifted, cooler, controlled, like stepping into a place where decisions carried weight. Samuel led him toward the east corridor, away from the main hall, away from the gathering. Miss Lawson is waiting, Samuel said. Nathan nodded, but just before they turned the corner, a voice carried faintly from the main room. Victoria, we were invited, she was saying, her tone tight but composed. There must be some confusion. Another voice responded. Calm, professional. That may be the case, Miss Hayes. However, access to certain areas is restricted. Nathan paused, just for a second, not long enough to be noticed, but long enough to hear the shift in her voice. The uncertainty, the first crack. Then he kept walking, because this wasn't where the truth would come out. Not yet. Samuel opened the door to the study. Margaret Lawson stood inside, already holding a folder, waiting, prepared. And the moment Nathan stepped in, she didn't greet him. Didn't offer condolences. She simply said, we don't have much time. Nathan closed the door behind him. What happened? He asked. Margaret placed the folder on the desk. Your father anticipated interference, she said. But it started sooner than expected. Nathan's expression sharpened slightly. From who? Margaret met his eyes. Then opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, transaction outlines, names he recognized and one he didn't expect. Logan Mercer. Nathan's grip tightened just slightly. Margaret's voice remained calm. He's already making moves on the board. Silence settled in the room. heavy, controlled, inevitable. And outside in the main hall, Victoria was still trying to convince people she belonged there. While inside the study, Nathan realized he might lose everything his father built. Before he even had the chance to claim it, Nathan didn't sit immediately. He remained standing in the study, one hand resting lightly on the edge of the desk, eyes fixed on the documents Margaret had laid out in front of him. The room felt smaller than it should have, not physically, but in the way pressure compresses space. Logan Mercer's name appeared more than once, not casually, strategically. Nathan picked up the first page, emails, internal communications, timestamps, stretching back months, long before Victoria had ever mentioned Logan's name. He read silently, each line tightening something inside him. He didn't just show up in her life, Nathan said quietly. Margaret watched him. No, he positioned himself. Yes. Nathan flipped to the next page, a breakdown of proposed transactions, a partial acquisition structure involving one of Bennett Dominion Holdings' clean energy subsidiaries. The numbers weren't exaggerated. They were precise, calculated. 2 board members, Nathan said, scanning the names. They've already been contacted. Margaret nodded. They've been approached under the assumption that the transition of control would be unstable. Nathan let out a slow breath, and they believe Logan can stabilize it. They believe he can benefit from it, Margaret corrected. Nathan set the papers down. For a moment he didn't move, because the pieces were aligning faster than he had expected. Logan hadn't pursued Victoria because he cared about her. He had followed a lead. A connection, a thread that led here, and Victoria Nathan closed his eyes briefly. She had walked straight into it, not forced, not manipulated completely, but guided, encouraged. And she had chosen to follow. Margaret spoke again, her tone steady but more urgent now. There's more. Nathan opened his eyes. She slid another document toward him, a legal draft. Incomplete, but clear in its intent. They're preparing a motion, she said, to delay the formal transfer of voting control. Nathan's gaze sharpened. On what grounds? Conflict of interest. Lack of executive experience. Questioning your capacity to assume immediate control. Nathan let out a quiet, almost humorless breath. They're building a narrative. Margaret didn't deny it. They're building leverage, she said. Nathan leaned back slightly, processing. His father had warned him without saying it directly. There would be a moment when everything came at once. This was it. Not later now. Nathan picked up the folder again, scanning faster this time. Patterns emerged. Logan's communications weren't emotional. They were structured, every message aligned with a step forward. Contact, position, influence, and then execution. Nathan stopped at one page. An internal note, short, direct. Subject remains unaware of full exposure. Continue engagement through intermediary. Nathan's fingers tightened slightly on the paper. Subject. They weren't even naming her. Victoria wasn't a partner. She wasn't even a person in their plan. She was access. Margaret watched him carefully. There's something else you should see. She reached for a tablet on the desk and turned it toward him. Security footage, she said, from earlier this morning. Nathan hesitated for just a second before taking it. The video began without sound. The SUV, the gate, Victoria stepping out, him stepping out, the bag hitting the gravel, Logan moving forward, replacing him. Nathan didn't look away, even when Margaret turned on the audio. A man who fixes broken buildings doesn't belong here. Victoria's voice, clear, sharp, final. Nathan's expression didn't change, but something settled, not anger, not shock, recognition. Margaret turned off the video. The clip is already circulating internally, she said. It hasn't reached the public yet, but it will. Nathan handed the tablet back slowly. Good, he said. Margaret paused. That wasn't the reaction she expected. You want it out there? She asked. Nathan shook his head once. No. He stepped away from the desk, moving toward the window. Outside, the estate stretched quietly, controlled, unshaken. They want to define the narrative, Nathan said. Let them try. Margaret studied him. You understand what's at risk, she said. If they succeed in delaying the transfer, they create time. Time creates opportunity, I know. And Logan already has influence in the room, she added. He's not waiting. Nathan turned back toward her. I'm not either. There it was, not loud, but decisive. Margaret's posture shifted slightly. Then we need to move quickly. Nathan nodded. We will. He walked back to the desk and closed the folder. What's the timeline? He asked. The formal reading of the will begins within the hour, Margaret said. After that, there's a scheduled board session tomorrow morning. Nathan considered that. Too much space in between. Too much time for interference. Move the board meeting, he said. Margaret raised an eyebrow. To when? Today. That's not standard. I'm not interested in standard. Margaret held his gaze for a moment longer, then nodded once. I'll make the calls. Nathan picked up the folder again, held it for a second, then set it down, because something mattered more than the documents. Where is she? He asked. Margaret didn't need clarification. Main hall, she said with the others. Nathan nodded. He turned toward the door. Margaret's voice stopped him. Nathan. He paused. There's one more thing, she said. If you confront this too early, you lose the advantage. Nathan didn't turn around. I'm not confronting anything, he said. Then what are you doing? Nathan opened the door slightly, stopped again, letting them show me exactly how far they're willing to go. Then he stepped out. The hallway was quieter now, but the energy had changed. Word traveled fast in places like this, even when no one said anything directly. Nathan moved toward the main hall, each step steady, measured, controlled. As he approached, voices became clearer. Victoria's voice, tighter now, less confident. I'm telling you, there must be a mistake. We were invited. A staff member responded politely. Access to certain areas requires verification. Logan's voice followed, smooth but edged now. Then verify it. Nathan stopped just before the entrance, out of sight, listening, because this mattered, not the words themselves, but how they said them, how far they pushed. I don't think you understand, Logan continued. We're not just guests, we were expected. There was a pause. Then another voice. Different, calmer, older. We expected Mr. Bennett. Silence, heavy, immediate. Nathan felt it from where he stood. Victoria didn't speak right away. When she did, her voice had changed. Who? She asked. Nathan stepped forward, not rushed, not dramatic, just present. And as he crossed the threshold into the room, every conversation stopped, every eye turned. And for the first time, Victoria looked at him like she was seeing a stranger. While Logan didn't look surprised. He looked interested, like a man who had just confirmed something he'd been trying to prove. Nathan met his gaze, held it, just long enough. Then shifted his attention to the room, to the people who already knew exactly who he was, and the ones who didn't. Because the next move would decide everything. The room didn't move, it froze. Not because Nathan had said anything, not because he had raised his voice or demanded attention, but because of the way people reacted to him. That was the difference. A man standing near the center of the room, older, composed, someone Victoria recognized from industry events, but had never spoken to, straightened immediately. Mr. Bennett, he said, not loudly, but clearly enough that everyone heard it, and more importantly recognized it. The tone wasn't polite. It was respectful, automatic, instinctive. Victoria felt it before she understood it. The shift. Like gravity had changed in the room and she was suddenly standing in the wrong place. She looked at Nathan again. No, not Nathan, Mr. Bennett. The name echoed in her mind now, pulling threads she hadn't noticed before. Conversations she hadn't fully listened to. References she had dismissed as irrelevant. Logan didn't speak right away. He watched, carefully, assessing. Because this wasn't confusion anymore. This was confirmation. Nathan stepped further into the room, his presence quiet but impossible to ignore. People moved slightly, not dramatically, just enough to create space for him. Victoria's chest tightened. You, she started, but the words didn't form. Nathan didn't look at her. Not yet. He acknowledged the others first. A nod here, a brief exchange of eye contact there. Not introductions, recognition. Margaret Lawson entered behind him, her timing precise as always. She moved to his side, not in front of him. Not guiding, just aligned. The reading will begin shortly, she said calmly, addressing the room. We ask everyone to take their seats. There was no hesitation. People moved. Chairs shifted. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Authority didn't need to announce itself. It was already understood. Victoria stood where she was, not moving. Judith stepped closer to her, lowering her voice. Sit down, she whispered sharply. Don't draw attention. Victoria obeyed automatically, but her eyes never left Nathan. Logan leaned slightly toward her as they took their seats. Stay calm, he murmured. We don't have the full picture yet. But he already knew enough. Nathan took a seat near the front, not because someone directed him, because that was where he belonged. Margaret stood at the front of the room, a document folder in her hands. Two legal associates stood behind her, prepared. The air shifted again. Formal now, structured. This wasn't just a memorial. This was a transition. Margaret began without preamble. Edward Bennett's estate has been prepared in accordance with his final directives. Today's proceedings will confirm the distribution of assets, governance control, and succession structure of Bennett Dominion Holdings. The name landed, clear, undeniable. Victoria felt it like a physical impact. Bennett. She turned her head slowly toward Nathan, his last name. Not the one she had known, not the one she had dismissed. Logan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He didn't look at Nathan, he looked at Margaret, listening more closely now. Because the structure of the room had changed, and he needed to understand how much. Margaret continued, her voice steady. Mr. Bennett has designated a single successor for controlling interest in the estate and associated holdings. A pause. Brief, intentional. Then Nathan Ashford Bennett. Silence. Not polite silence, shock. The kind that ripples through a room before anyone has time to react. Victoria's breath caught, her fingers tightened against the armrest. No, that didn't make sense, it couldn't. Nathan sat exactly as he had before, still, composed. As if this moment had already passed for him. Judith leaned forward slightly, her voice barely contained. This as she stopped. Because no one else was speaking, no one else was questioning it. Logan finally turned his head, slowly, deliberately, toward Nathan, and for the first time there was no charm in his expression. Only calculation, Margaret continued. Mr. Bennett will assume majority voting control of Bennett Dominion Holdings, including all primary subsidiaries, international assets, and strategic divisions, effective immediately upon confirmation of this reading. Victoria shook her head slightly, as if trying to force reality back into place. This wasn't possible. Nathan couldn't. She thought back to everything, the house, the truck, the work, the quiet way he lived. None of it matched this, unless it had never been the truth. Her stomach dropped. Logan spoke, cutting through the silence with measured precision. On what basis is immediate control being granted? His tone was respectful, careful. But the challenge was there. Margaret didn't react. The basis is legal ownership, she said, established through documented inheritance and pre-existing share allocation. Logan nodded slowly, as if accepting the answer, but his eyes didn't soften. Because this wasn't over. Not for him, not yet. Victoria leaned forward slightly, her voice unsteady. Nathan, he didn't look at her. Not even now. Margaret continued reading. The estate includes controlling interest exceeding 60% of voting shares, full access to private investment networks, and executive authority over all current and future strategic decisions. Each word made it harder to breathe. Victoria's mind raced. Every moment, every decision, every time she had dismissed him, every time she had compared him, every time she had chosen Logan. The realization didn't come all at once. It came in pieces, sharp, unforgiving, and none of them could be undone. Margaret closed the document folder. That concludes the primary reading. The room didn't erupt. It didn't need to. The weight of what had just happened settled into every corner. Nathan stood slowly, not dramatically, just enough to signal that the moment had shifted. He turned slightly and finally looked at Victoria, not with anger, not with satisfaction, with distance, the kind that forms when something has already ended. Victoria stood too. Without thinking Nathan, she began, but the words sounded wrong now, too small. Too late. He held her gaze for a moment, then looked away. Because whatever she was about to say didn't matter anymore. Logan stood next, his posture controlled again, reconstructed. He adjusted his jacket slightly, then stepped forward just enough to position himself within the conversation. Congratulations, he said to Nathan, polite, measured. But his eyes said something else entirely. This wasn't over, not even close. Nathan met his gaze, didn't respond, because he had already seen what Logan was trying to do. And this time, he wasn't going to stay silent. Margaret stepped closer to Nathan, lowering her voice just enough that only he could hear. The board is already requesting an emergency session, she said. They want clarity on leadership before the end of the day. Nathan nodded once. Of course they did. Because control like this didn't wait. He glanced briefly toward Logan, then toward Victoria, still standing, still trying to understand, still too late. Set it up, Nathan said quietly. Margaret didn't hesitate. It's already in motion. Nathan exhaled slowly, then stepped forward, into the space that had been his all along. And behind him, Logan pulled out his phone, his expression calm again, focused, already moving. Because while Victoria was just beginning to realize what she had lost, Logan was already planning how to take it. Logan didn't wait. By the time Nathan stepped out of the library, the tone of the estate had already shifted again. Not publicly, not visibly to everyone. But beneath the surface, something had started moving. Logan walked along the corridor with controlled urgencies, his phone pressed briefly to his ear before he lowered it again. He wasn't calling randomly, he was choosing. Timing mattered, so did leverage. He stepped into a quiet alcove near the east wing, just out of sight of the main hall, and made the call again. "They've confirmed him," Logan said, voice low, precise, majority control, immediate. A pause. Then no, we don't wait. He listened, his expression tightening slightly. They're reacting emotionally right now, that's the window. Once the board stabilizes, it's gone. Another pause. Then he added, "We move before he understands what he actually has." He ended the call, not frustrated, or focused. Because this wasn't a loss yet, it was just a shift in position. Behind him, Victoria's voice broke the silence. "Logan." He turned slowly. She looked different now. Not the same controlled confidence she had carried in a Blackwood manner. Something had cracked, or not fully broken, but enough you knew something, she said. It wasn't an accusation. Not yet. It was something worse, realization. Logan studied her for a moment before answering. "I knew there were inconsistencies," he said carefully. "Not this." Victoria stepped closer. "You told me he was holding me back. I told you what you were already feeling." That landed. Because it was true, and that made it harder to reject. Her voice lowered. "He's not who I thought he was." Logan's expression didn't change. "No, he isn't." There was no comfort in that, no reassurance, only recalculation. Victoria swallowed. "Then what happens now?" Logan didn't answer immediately, because the honest answer wasn't for her. Not yet. Instead, he said, "Now we adapt." The word felt cold, or strategic, not emotional, and for the first time, Victoria noticed the difference. Not just in Nathan, but in Logan. She stepped back slightly. "You're not surprised enough," she said. Logan met her gaze. "I'm practical enough." That was the truth, and it created distance. Because in that moment, Victoria realized something she hadn't allowed herself to see before. Logan wasn't here for her, not the way she had believed. He was here for opportunity, and she might have just been one of them. Before she could respond, Judith's voice cut in sharply from the hallway. "Victoria, we need to talk." Judith approached quickly, her composure intact, but strained at the edges. She glanced briefly at Logan, then focused entirely on her daughter. "What just happened in there," Judith said under her breath, "does not change everything." Victoria stared at her. "It changes everything." Judith shook her head. "No, it changes what we thought we knew. That's not the same thing." Her tone hardened. "You're still his wife." Victoria hesitated. It felt that's different now. Not secure, not stable. Transactional. Judith leaned closer. "Which means you still have position." There it was, the angle, the strategy. Victoria felt something twist inside her. "That's not how this works," she said quietly. Judith's expression sharpened. "That is exactly how this works. You think families like this operate on emotion? They operate on structure, on alignment." Her voice dropped even lower. "You don't walk away from something like this because you're embarrassed." Victoria flinched, because that wasn't what she was feeling, not just embarrassment. Loss. Real loss. But Judith didn't see that, or didn't care. "You go back in there," Judith continued, "and you stand next to him like you belong there, because whether you realized it or not," she paused. "You married into power," the words echoed, but they didn't feel like victory. They felt like something hollow. Behind them, footsteps approached. She didn't interrupt immediately. She observed. Then she spoke, calm as ever. "Mrs. Hayes." Judith turned, her expression shifting instantly into controlled politeness. Ms. Lawson Margareted slightly, then looked at Victoria. "Mr. Bennett will be meeting with the board shortly," she said. "The session is restricted." Judith smiled faintly. "Of course, Victoria will be accompanying her husband." Margaret held her gaze, unmoved. "No," she said simply. The word landed clean. Final. Victoria felt it. Judith's smile tightened. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding. My daughter is." "There is no misunderstanding," Margaret replied. Her tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. Spousal status does not grant access to governance discussions within Bennett Dominion Holdings. Judith's composure cracked just slightly. She has every right to. She has no legal authority within the company structure," Margaret said, direct, unapologetic, and accurate. Silence followed. Victoria felt the weight of it settle over her, not just exclusion, Clarification, she wasn't part of this. Or not in the way she had assumed. Margaret turned slightly toward Victoria. "Mr. Bennett will speak with you if he chooses to," she said. Not because he is required to. That distinction mattered, and it cut deeper than anything else so far. Margaret stepped back, conversation over. Judith exhaled sharply once Margaret was gone. "This is temporary," she muttered. "They're trying to control the narrative." But Victoria didn't respond because something else had taken hold, a memory. Nathan sitting quietly at their kitchen table weeks ago, listening, always listening, while she talked about promotions, about connections, and he had never argued, never pushed back, just watched, as if he already knew where it would end. Her chest tightened. Logan stepped forward again, voice calm. "This isn't over," he said. "Not for you." Victoria looked this time, and what she saw wasn't reassurance. It was intent, focused, directed. "Logan," she said slowly, "what are you planning?" He held her gaze. Then, after a brief pause, answered honestly, "Something that puts us back in control. Us." The word felt wrong now. Victoria's voice dropped. "And me? Where do I fit in that?" Logan didn't hesitate. "That depends on what you're willing to do." There it was, clear, unfiltered, not love, not partnership, a decision, and for the first time Victoria wasn't sure she wanted to make it. Across the estate, in a private room overlooking the eastern grounds, Nathan stood by the window. The board meeting would begin in minutes. Margaret entered quietly, placing a folder on the table. "Preliminary communications," she said. "Logan Mercer has already contacted 2 board members. Nathan didn't turn. Which ones?" Margaret named them. Nathan nodded once. Not surprised. "Positioning a sale?" he asked. "Yes." Nathan exhaled slowly, already moving, already trying to reshape something that wasn't his. Margaret watched him carefully. "We can block it, but we need to act quickly." Nathan turned now. Finally. And there was something different in his expression. Not hesitation anymore. Not distance. Clarity. "They think I'm unprepared," he said. Margaret didn't respond, because that wasn't a question. Nathan picked up the folder, flipped it open, scanned the contents, then closed it again. "They've had time to plan," he said, "so we stop reacting." Margaret tilted her head slightly, and instead, Nathan met her gaze. "We show them they're already too late." Margaret studied him for a moment, then nodded. Because now he sounded exactly like the man who was meant to sit in that room. Nathan set the folder down, then reached for his phone, paused, and made a different call. Not to the board, not to the company. To someone who hadn't been part of this yet. Someone who had been waiting. The line connected and his voice was calm. "I need everything you have on Logan Mercer," he said. "Every contact, every deal, every inconsistency." A pause. Then, send it directly to Margaret. He ended the call, and for the first time since the gates of Blackwood Manor, Nathan wasn't just responding. He was preparing to take control. Across the hall, Logan looked down at his phone as a message came through. His expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. Because the name on the sender line was not one he had expected to see, and the message was only 3 words. "We need to talk." The boardroom at Blackwood Manor felt colder than the rest of the estate, not in temperature, in tone. The long, polished table reflected every movement, every glance, every hesitation. Men and women who had spent decades managing billions now sat in measured silence, watching Nathan take his seat at the far end. Some of them had known his father for years, trusted him, built fortunes under his direction. Now they were looking at a man they didn't recognize. A restoration worker, a quiet presence, someone who had never once stepped into this room before today. And yet, he now held controlling voting shares. That contradiction hung in the air. Logan entered last, not rushed, not flustered, deliberate. He took a position slightly off-center, not at the head, but close enough to signal confidence. The 2 board members he had contacted earlier sat within reach, aligned, not openly, but clearly enough. Nathan noticed. He didn't react. Margaret Lawson stood at the side of the room, a folder in her hands, her presence steady. She had already briefed him. Logan had moved faster than expected, but not fast enough. Logan began speaking before anyone else could set the tone. "Given the circumstances," he said, voice calm, measured, "I believe we need to address the immediate instability facing Bennett Dominion Holdings." He didn't look at Nathan when he said it, or he looked at the board, because that was the audience that mattered. "We are dealing with a contested succession in the public eye," Logan continued. "Media exposure, internal uncertainty, and now a leadership transition that, he paused, carefully, has not been tested. There it was, polite, but sharp. A direct challenge without saying it outright. A few board members shifted slightly, not agreeing, not disagreeing, listening. Logan stepped closer to the table. My concern isn't not personal, he added. It's structural. We are responsible for $1 trillion enterprise. We cannot afford volatility at this level. He let that settle, then delivered his proposal. A controlled divestiture of the clean energy division, he said. A partial sale to a stable investment consortium would secure liquidity, reduce exposure, and protect overall valuation while governance questions are resolved. He didn't say his name. He didn't say ownership. But it was implied. Margaret's eyes didn't move. Nathan's didn't either. The room stayed quiet. Because the proposal made sense on paper, that was the danger. Logan finished smoothly. This is not about removing control, he said. It's about preserving it. He stepped back. Confident, prepared, certain he had shifted the room. Nathan waited a moment before standing, not rushed, not defensive, measured. He placed both hands lightly on the table, his gaze moving across each board member. He didn't speak immediately, and that silence did something Logan hadn't expected. It slowed the room down, or it forced attention. Nathan finally spoke. Before we discuss any transactions, he said. There's context you need. His voice was steady, clear, not loud, but it carried. I should have told you sooner who I was, he continued. And I didn't. That's on me. A few people exchanged glances, not expecting that, not expecting him to acknowledge fault. Nathan didn't linger there. I'm not asking you to trust me because of my name, he said. I'm asking you to look at the facts in front of you. He nodded once toward Margaret. That was the signal. Margaret stepped forward and opened the folder. Over the past 12 months, she began. There have been a series of coordinated inquiries into Bennett Dominion's Clean Energy Division. She placed documents on the table. Copies slid toward each board member. Those inquiries were traced to entities linked to Mr. Logan Mercer. The room shifted. Not loudly, but noticeably. Logan didn't move, didn't react, Margaret continued. These inquiries were not standard market evaluations. They were targeted, structured, and aligned with internal information that was not publicly available. She let that land. Then added, we also have documented communication between Mr. Mercer and 2 current board members outlining potential terms for a pre-arranged acquisition. Silence, heavier now. One of the 2 men she had referenced stiffened slightly. Logan's jaw tightened just enough to be visible, but he still didn't interrupt. Nathan watched, carefully. Margaret moved to the next document. Additionally, she said, there is evidence of data access through unauthorized channels tied to an external device used within this estate. That shifted the tone. Now it wasn't just strategy. It was risk, legal risk. Logan finally spoke. This is a misinterpretation, he said calmly. Preliminary discussions are not uncommon in transactions of this scale. Margaret didn't look at him. These were not preliminary, she replied. They were conditional. She pressed a button on the small device beside her. An audio file began to play. Logan's voice filled the room, clear, unmistakable. In the first recording, he sounded composed, confident, explaining how access to internal relationships would create leverage. Then the second recording, shorter, colder. She's temporary, Logan's voice said. Once the signatures are secured, we exit clean. Silence. Absolute. The meaning didn't need explanation. Every person in the room understood. Victoria, used, positioned, disposable. Nathan didn't look at her, but felt heat, the shift, the truth landing. Logan didn't deny it, not immediately, because denial would have made it worse. Instead, he said, that's taken out of context. But the room had already moved, not dramatically, not visibly. But the alignment had broken. Margaret stepped back. Her part done, Nathan stepped forward again. This isn't about punishment, he said. It's about clarity. He looked at the board. You're being asked to approve a sale that was planned before I ever walked into this room. Without full disclosure, without alignment. He paused, then added quietly, that's not stewardship. The word hit. Because Logan had used it earlier, now it turned against him. Nathan straightened slightly. I'm not selling the clean energy division, he said. Not under pressure. Not under incomplete information. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. I'm asking for a vote, he said. That was it. No speech, no performance, just a decision. The board members looked at each other, not confused, resolving. One by one, hands began to lift. Clear, The motion passed. Logan stood still. For the first time, he had lost the room, completely. The two board members aligned with him didn't speak, didn't defend, because there was nothing left to defend. Margaret spoke again. Given the findings, she said, "We will be initiating a formal review of the involved parties and referring the matter to regulatory authorities." That was the consequence. Structured, measured, real. Logan exhaled slowly, not angry, not panicked, or calculating, because this wasn't the end. He turned to leave, but before he reached the door, he stopped, not for the board. For Nathan. He looked at him directly. No charm now, no performance, just something sharper. "You're not as protected as you think," Logan said quietly. Nathan met his gaze, didn't respond, didn't need to, because whatever Logan thought he still had, Nathan had already started closing the gap. Logan left. The door shut behind him. The room remained still for a moment. Then movement resumed, controlled, professional, but the shift had happened. Nathan had taken control, not by force, by truth. Margaret stepped closer to him. "It's done," she said. Nathan nodded once. But his attention wasn't on the board anymore, because across the room, Victoria was standing near the doorway. She had heard enough, seen enough, and for the first time since she stepped into Blackwood Manor, she wasn't looking at Nathan like someone trying to reclaim something. She was looking at him like someone realizing she had never understood what she lost. Nathan held her gaze for a brief moment, then looked away. Decision made, boundary set. But Victoria didn't move, not immediately, because something else had just broken inside her. Not pride, not ambition, something deeper, and she wasn't sure how to fix it. Outside the boardroom, down the long corridor, Logan stepped into a quiet corner and pulled out his phone again. He didn't hesitate this time. He called back. "They've seen some of it," he said. "Not all." A pause. His expression hardened slightly. "No, we proceed." Another pause, then, "Yes. Release it." He ended the call, and as he slipped the phone back into his pocket, a faint smile crossed his face. Because the game wasn't over, not even close inside the boardroom, Nathan's phone vibrated. He glanced down. A message, unknown sender, no name, just a file attachment, and one line of text. "You don't know everything about her." Nathan didn't open the file immediately, not in the boardroom, not with eyes still on him, even as the meeting began to dissolve into quiet conversations and controlled exits. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, his expression unchanged, as if nothing had interrupted the moment. But something had, and he knew it. Margaret noticed. Of course she did. She waited until the last board member stepped out before approaching him. "Something new?" she asked quietly. "Unknown sender, about Victoria." Margaret didn't react emotionally. "Forward it to me." Nathan didn't move. "Not yet. I'll review it first," he said. Margaret studied him for a brief second, then gave a small nod. "Be careful with assumptions. Information like that is rarely sent without intent." "I know. That was why he hadn't opened it. Because whoever sent it wanted him to react." Nathan left the boardroom alone. The hallway outside felt quieter now, the tension more contained, but not gone. Staff moved carefully. Conversations lowered as he passed. The shift in power had settled in. They knew who he was now, even if they didn't fully understand him yet. Nathan didn't go to the main study. He turned instead toward a smaller private room at the far end of the west corridor, a place his father had used when he needed distance from the house without leaving it. He closed the door behind him, then finally took out his phone. The message still sat there. "You don't know everything about her, no name, no context, just the file." Nathan hesitated for a moment longer, not out of fear, or out of discipline, because once he opened it, he couldn't unsee it. Then he tapped. The file loaded slowly. Documents, multiple. Financial statements first. Not large amounts, not obvious, but consistent transfers. Small, controlled, spread over months. From accounts tied to Victoria's firm, to a private investment entity Nathan didn't recognize. He frowned slightly. This wasn't personal spending. It was structured, intentional. He scrolled further. Emails. Not romantic, not emotional, professional, between Victoria and Logan. Early ones, before their relationship had turned physical, or before it had even become visible. Discussions about access, a positioning within proximity. Nathan's jaw tightened slightly, because the tone was different, not manipulated, not passive, engaged, curious, willing. He kept reading. A final document, a draft agreement, unsigned, but detailed. If certain internal information within Bennett Dominion became accessible, Victoria would receive equity positioning in a secondary fund managed through Logan's network. Not ownership, not control, a share, a benefit, if she helped open the door. Nathan sat back slowly. The room felt smaller now, quieter, not because of the documents themselves, but because of what they meant. This hadn't started as something done to her. Not entirely. There had been a choice. Early, small, but real. A willingness to step closer to something she didn't fully understand, and that willingness had grown. Nathan exhaled slowly. He didn't feel anger, not the sharp kind, something heavier. Disappointment maybe, or clarity. There had been moments when he wondered if she had been completely pulled into it, if Logan had engineered everything. Now he knew. It was more complicated than that, and that made it harder. A soft knock came at the door. Nathan didn't answer immediately. The knockster Bennett? Samuel Brooks. Nathan closed the file and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Come in. Samuel entered quietly, closing the door behind him. She's asking to see you. Nathan didn't need clarification. Victoria. He nodded once. Where the South Garden, of course. Nathan stood, straightened his jacket slightly, and walked past Samuel without another word. The garden was quiet, almost too quiet. The fountain ran steadily, the sound soft but constant, filling the space where conversation might have been. Victoria stood near the edge of the stone path, her back to him. She didn't turn when he approached. Not immediately. Nathan stopped a few feet away, gave her the space to choose. She finally spoke. I didn't know. Her voice was steady, but not strong. Nathan didn't answer, because that sentence was incomplete. She turned slowly. Her eyes met his, and there was something different now. Not confidence, not control. Something closer to honesty, at least, she added, not at the beginning. Nathan held her gaze. Which part? He asked. It wasn't accusatory, it was precise. Victoria flinched slightly, because she understood what he meant. She looked down briefly, then back up. Logan Vestment. The way he approached things. I thought it was opportunity. Nathan didn't move, and later he asked. Her silence answered first. Then I knew it wasn't clean, she said quietly. There it was. Not everything, but enough. Nathan nodded once, not in agreement, in acknowledgement. I didn't think it would go this far, she continued. I didn't think, she stopped, because the rest didn't matter. Intent didn't erase outcome. Nathan spoke. You didn't think it would cost you anything. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't sharp, just clear. Victoria's eyes flickered, because that was true too. She stepped closer. Is that what you think of me? She asked. Nathan didn't hesitate. I think you made choices, he said, and you kept making them. No anger, no raised voice, and somehow, that made it worse. Victoria swallowed. I didn't know who you were, she said. Nathan's expression didn't change. That wasn't the problem. She blinked, caught off guard. The problem, he continued, is that you decided who I was worth before you knew. Silence. The fountain filled it. Victoria's shoulders lowered slightly, because there was no argument for that, no way to reframe it. She looked at him again, but this time there was no strategy behind it. No angle, just something raw. I made a mistake, she said. Nathan didn't respond, not immediately, because the word felt too small for everything that had happened. I know that doesn't fix anything, she added quickly. I know it doesn't change what I did. But she stopped again, because she didn't know how to finish that sentence. Nathan studied her for a moment, then said quietly, You didn't just make a mistake. The words landed slowly. You built something on the wrong foundation, he continued, and you kept building even when it didn't feel right. Victoria's breath caught slightly, because that was the part she hadn't said out loud, the part she hadn't wanted to admit. Nathan stepped back, not physically, emotionally. I'm not going to punish you, he said, her eyes lifted, surprised, but I'm not going to ignore it either. That was the line, clear, unmovable. Nodded slowly, because she understood. Finally, there was nothing left to negotiate, nothing left to reclaim. Only to consequence. Nathan turned slightly, ready to leave. But then he stopped, just for a moment. There's something else, he said. Victoria looked at him again. What? Nathan hesitated, not long, just enough to decide. Then he took out his phone, opened the file, and turned the screen toward her. I didn't know everything either, he said. Victoria stepped closer, looked down. And as her eyes moved across the documents, the color drained from her face. Not because she didn't recognize them, but because she did. Every line, every transfer, every message. And suddenly she understood something she hadn't before. Logan hadn't just used her. He had documented her. prepared for this, from the beginning. Victoria's hand trembled slightly. He said it was normal, she whispered. He said this is how deals start. Nathan didn't answer, because it didn't matter what Logan had said, only what had been done. Victoria looked up, panic flickering through her composure for the first time. What is he going to do with this? Nathan's expression hardened slightly, because now the question wasn't about regret, it was about risk. He already started, Nathan said. Victoria froze, because she heard something in his tone, not fear, not uncertainty, something worse, certainty. Nathan's phone vibrated again. Another message, same unknown sender. He glanced down, then back at her. The message was short. He's not done with you yet. Nathan looked at Victoria one last time, then said quietly, neither am I. The garden felt different that afternoon, quieter than before, but not heavy. The tension that had once filled the space was gone, replaced by something steadier. The fountain still ran, its sound unchanged, but now it felt like background instead of pressure. Victoria stood where she had been the last time they spoke, but she didn't look the same. There was no calculation in her posture, no attempt to position herself, just stillness. Nathan approached without hurry. He had already made his decisions. What remained was not negotiation, it was closure. Victoria turned when she heard his steps. Her eyes met his, and this time she didn't look away. I heard, she said quietly, about Logan. Nathan nodded once. It had unfolded quickly. The evidence Margaret presented hadn't stayed inside the boardroom. Regulatory authorities had moved. Accounts were frozen. Investigations opened. The two board members who aligned with Logan had been suspended pending review. Logan Mercer wasn't gone yet, but his position was. Victoria let out a slow breath. He called me this morning, she said, before they cut his access. Nathan didn't ask what was said. He already knew the pattern. He didn't apologize, she continued. He didn't explain. He just told me to stay quiet, that everything would stabilize if I didn't interfere. A faint, bitter smile crossed her face. Like I was still part of the plan. Nathan didn't respond, because that part spoke for itself. Victoria stepped a little closer, but not enough to close the distance between them. I thought I was choosing a better life, she said. I told myself that over and over, that I wasn't betraying anything, just moving forward. She paused, searching for the right words, but there weren't any that made it cleaner. I kept telling myself you didn't fit into the future I wanted, she added. But the truth is I stopped fitting into the person I used to be. Nathan watched her, not cold, not distant, but no longer reaching for her either. Victoria's voice softened. I knew something was off with Logan. I knew it before everything collapsed. And I stayed anyway. She shook her head slightly. Because by then I had already made too many choices I didn't want to undo. That was the part she hadn't said before. Not to him, not even to herself. Nathan nodded slowly. I know, he said. The words weren't forgiving, but they weren't dismissive either. Just honest. Victoria looked at him carefully. Do you hate me? Nathan considered the question, not long, but long enough to answer it truthfully. No, he said. That surprised her. I don't, he continued, because hate would mean I'm still tied to what we were. The space between them widened slightly, not physically, emotionally. I'm not, he said. Victoria lowered her eyes, because she understood what that meant. Not anger, not revenge, something quieter, final. The divorce papers are ready, she said, after a moment. My lawyer reviewed them this morning. Nathan nodded again. Margaret coordinated the terms. Fair, structured, no hidden leverage, no punishment. Victoria let out a small breath. You didn't take anything from me, Nathan met her gaze. You already lost what mattered. The words landed, not harsh, but undeniable. Victoria nodded slowly. She didn't argue, didn't defend herself, because for the first time she wasn't trying to. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said, and I'm not asking to come back. That part was clear now. No performance, no attempt to reclaim something that couldn't be rebuilt. But I needed to say it, she added. That I see it now, all of it, the way I treated you, the way I decided what you were worth. Her voice trembled slightly, but she didn't stop. I thought money was the difference between a life that mattered and one that didn't, she said. I thought I was being practical. She shook her head again. I was just being blind. Nathan listened. He didn't interrupt, because this wasn't about him correcting her. It was about her finally seeing it without needing him to explain. I don't regret loving you, he said quietly. Victoria looked up, caught off guard. But I regret staying silent when it started to change, he continued. I kept waiting for you to come back to who you were, or instead of accepting that you were choosing something else. That true's blame as recognition. Victoria swallowed. And now? Nathan didn't hesitate. Now we end it cleanly. No hesitation, no ambiguity. Victoria nodded. There was pain in her expression, but not shock, because she already knew. That's fair, she said. They stood there for a moment longer, the fountain filling the silence again. No more arguments, no more attempts to fix something already broken. Just two people standing at the end of something that had taken years to fall apart. Victoria stepped back first, not dramatically, just enough to mark the distance. I hope, she said slowly, you find someone who sees you the way I should have. Nathan didn't answer that, not because it didn't matter, but because it wasn't something that needed to be decided today. Victoria gave a small nod, then turned and walked toward the house. She didn't look back. Nathan watched her go. Not with longing, not with anger, just with the quiet understanding that what they had wasn't coming back and that it shouldn't. The divorce finalized within weeks. No public spectacle, no drawn-out battle. Just signatures, terms, and a clean legal separation. Victoria kept what she had built within her own work. Nothing more, nothing less. Judith Hayes found her social circle narrowing faster than she expected. Invitations stopped coming. Conversations cooled. The same people who once leaned in now kept their distance. Not because of scandal alone, because they understood what had happened at that gate and what it revealed. Logan Mercer's investigation deepened. Federal inquiries, financial audits, partners distancing themselves within days. His network unraveled piece by piece, not dramatically, but steadily. The structure he built didn't collapse all at once. It eroded, and there was nothing left to stabilize it. Nathan didn't follow any of it closely. He didn't need to, because his role wasn't to watch them fall. It was to decide what he would build next. Months later, he stood at the same gate where everything had shifted. The gravel path was unchanged. The security screen still mounted on the side, the same place where his bag had hit the ground. But the moment felt different now. Not like something taken from him, like something he had moved beyond. Samuel stood a few steps behind him, quiet as always. Still want to keep it as it is? Samuel asked. Nathan looked at the gate, then nodded, yes. Not because of what happened there, but because it reminded him of what mattered, of what didn't, and of the difference between the two. He turned toward the house and started walking, not as someone proving anything, not as someone reclaiming anything, just as someone who finally understood his place and chose it. If this story stayed with you, let me know what you think about Nathan's choice and whether you would have done the same.